You guys may not have heard any of what Brad had to say yesterday, but I think that clip, he's talking about F them picks and the mentality. They want to draft. They'll trade a pick here or there for a player that makes sense, but they are not in F them picks mode. And he even kind of bristled at the window talk too. Like, we don't believe in windows. The walls aren't closing in. Certainly doesn't feel like they need to get uber aggressive. He said stay the course a bunch yesterday, John.
Yeah, and I mean, he also used the term, it's why we are where we are. Well, I mean, that cuts both ways. We just lost in the divisional round, and maybe we're there because we don't have that one player. And I don't necessarily think that's the reason now, but I also think, yes, you could continue to build for the draft, and I'm not a proponent of, hey, 2 first-round picks for this guy, and you know, unless, like he said, it's the right fit and it's going to help the team win. I don't know that guy's out there, and I know everybody's probably right now thinking of Max Crosby. Maybe that is the only one that would make it plausible. But then you start thinking about salary cap. You start thinking about guys that you might not be able to keep down the road. Who would you be willing to cut later to have Max Crosby opposite Aiden Hutchinson? And I think that list probably grows quite a bit because everybody would drool over the possibility of seeing those two guys on the field for a long time here in Detroit.
So where are you guys at? Stay the course or F them picks? 248-539-9797. And we'll play more of Brad Holmes here in the next half hour so you get a better idea of just where he's at. But for you guys, is it stay the course, or would you like to see them be a little more urgent in trying to capture a Super Bowl while the iron's hot?
I think this is right now, in the offseason, it's a stay the course for me. And because I think Brad Holmes, what do we know about him in his track record? And it grows every year. He's been pretty good at draft picks. Not everything is hit, but a high percentage for him, higher than most general managers have hit. And this, to me, is a year where you're going to need a lot of picks because you've got to water the garden and fertilize it a little bit. Offensive line and depth on the defensive line. We've seen this year, depth on the defensive line is huge. And I don't know, nobody can predict injuries. All you know is that they're going to happen. Maybe not at the same rate or on this, on one side of the ball as they did this past year. But you can never have too many offensive linemen. You can never have too many defensive linemen. I think that was made abundantly clear to us this year. And with an aging O-line, how long does it take Frank to recover from this year? With the torn pec, the foot, the toe,
he says he feels great.
Terrific. But as guys get older, and we heard Brad talk about Kevin Zeitler, guys of a certain age, it really becomes a part of the equation. Can you make it through a 17-game season enough to where we can count on you? And if they're looking at Zeitler going, well, do we want to re-up him and bring him back? And I'm just using him as an example because you can put Taylor Decker in there, Frank, you can put Glasgow in there. Are we good with 13 of the 17 games? That's about what you got out of Decker this year.
Mm-hmm.
Are we good with that? And do we have the talent to step in there in those 4 games where one of those older offensive linemen aren't going to be? So it's a long way to get to. I'm good with right now not of building through the draft. Now, when you get into the season, I think you open up the opportunity at the trade deadline to say F them picks.
Yeah, I know he's done such a good job. Back-to-back executive of the year, Brad Holmes. We got a really good one here in Detroit. Far be it for anyone to question the way he has built or plans to keep building this football team, right? He's done it unorthodox. He drafted a running back in the first round. He took an off-ball linebacker in the first round. But he has kept this offensive line going. He's found all pros late in the draft, St. Brown and Kirby Joseph. You certainly want him to have draft capital. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't want them to show more urgency, given the fact that they had squandered 2 different real chances to win the Super Bowl. Because he's such a good drafter, I am comfortable giving up a first-round pick or potentially 2 first-round picks because I know I can find Kirby Joseph in the 3rd or Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th. Max Crosby was essentially begging to get out of Vegas with the comments about how much he appreciates what Detroit's doing right now. We know Brad Holmes called about Max Crosby last November, per Dave Burkett. That's not just some blogger. That's Dave Burkett, as trusted a beat writer as there is, saying, no, they called about Max Crosby. So I don't think I'm asking for anything Brad Holmes hasn't already been interested in doing.
Well, and Brad basically said that yesterday without talking about names. As you get to the trade deadline, and he said that was the most challenging moment for him as a GM, because you're going to call on all these guys, and then all of a sudden you figure out they're not all available, and it starts to really pare down on those that might be available. And he obviously ended up landing Zadarius Smith, but when you start removing guys like Trey Hendrickson, Max Crosby, all the guys that we had talked about at that time, if they're not even on the market and there's nothing that you could send Cincinnati or Vegas at that time to get those guys, now you're looking at 2 or 3 individuals. One of them had, starting caliber of play, but you're not the only ones in the market at that time, which I think kind of makes it more remarkable that he was able to send what he wanted to Cleveland to get Zadarius.
So Crosby's contract, I believe, is up after 26. 26 is when the cap bill starts to really come due in Detroit. It's when Goff's deal really balloons. It's when Sewell and St. Brown are really going to be deals to navigate around, and you can, and Brad will. It's going to be hard to keep everybody beyond 2026. You start throwing in Hutchinson and Joseph and Branch and Laporta, and no one asked about JMO yesterday. Maybe he's not here. I don't know. My point is, if you like all these guys, you want to keep all these guys, it may not be possible. So is it worth trying to win while you have them all in the next 2 seasons? And I know that is a little more F them picks, and that's not stay the course, but isn't that the best way to try to win a Super Bowl while I have Joseph, Branch, Laporta, J-Mo, Hutch on top of the guys they already paid, on top of a short window with Max Crosby? It might be he's not going to be here long term, but you bring him in for 2 years to chase a Super Bowl for a team he grew up rooting for. It makes a lot of sense to me, and because we know Brad Holmes has called on it, I don't think I'm just spewing this morning. I don't think I'm just trying to force something I want. I think it's at least a consideration for Brad Holmes, and it would pull him away from the current course, and it would push him more towards F them picks.